There is a certain kind of man who does not belong to this world. He walks through it, yes, pays his taxes, drinks his coffee, goes to work, but he never quite feels real in it. His thoughts stretch like cathedral shadows across everything he touches. He questions things others take for granted. Love, time, God, selfhood, not just on Sundays or when life collapses, but in the quiet of an ordinary Tuesday. He can hold beauty and tragedy in the same breath. He is not easy to love, and if he falls in love, deeply, earnestly, it can be both the most intoxicating and most suffocating experience for the one he chooses. Why? Why is it that so many deep thinkers, men like Søren Kierkegaard, loved fiercely but were often abandoned, misunderstood, or quietly left behind? Why do some women, even when captivated by a man's depth, ultimately walk away? We're told to seek emotional intelligence, to value depth, to find someone who thinks deeply and feels fully. But when we do, when we really meet that person, something in us might hesitate. Because this kind of love demands something else, a willingness to hold paradox, a tolerance for uncertainty, and not everyone wants to live at the edge of existential truth. In Kierkegaard's life, this was not just a theory. He lived it, and he lost love because of it. His broken engagement to Regine Olsen, the woman he never stopped loving, became both his personal grief and his philosophical muse. He believed that to love her the way he needed to protect her from the storm of his interior world, he had to let her go. But was that truly noble? Or was it a man retreating into abstraction because he feared the mess of human closeness? This is not just a story about one 19th century Danish philosopher. It is a story about many men and women today, about the tension between intellect and intimacy, between needing space to think and the desire to be held, between the fear of being misunderstood and the ache of being truly seen. We are going to dive deep, not just into Kierkegaard's strange, aching love story, but into the psychology of modern relationships, the paradox of the overthinker, the subtle reasons why emotional depth can become a liability in romance, and why this tension has haunted humanity across cultures and centuries. Because even now, in an age obsessed with self-awareness and mindfulness, many people still walk away from the very connection they claim to crave. And it leaves us wondering, can a deep thinker ever be truly loved? Or is he destined to live in exile? Not from the world, but from the hearts he tries to touch. To understand why the deep thinker is often left unloved, we need to look back. Far back. Not just to Kierkegaard's Denmark, but to the recurring figure of the solitary philosopher, the melancholic poet, the wandering mystic, the man who thought too much and loved too deeply. In ancient Greece, Socrates famously claimed that an unexamined life is not worth living. He asked questions that made people uncomfortable, tore down illusions, and stood trial for corrupting the youth. Socrates was married, but his wife, Xanthippe, has gone down in legend as temperamental and bitter. Maybe because loving someone who questions everything is a kind of exhaustion. When every moment is a mirror, love loses its softness. The Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, believed in detachment from desire. For them, love was too often the gateway to suffering. It disrupted the rational mind, destabilized the soul. They wrote in journals more than they wrote to their lovers. They trained themselves to be unmoved. And even when they did love, it was with a strange restraint, more like admiration than abandon. In the East, the picture was different, but not necessarily more romantic. Buddhist monks renounced worldly attachments altogether, believing that love, like all things, was impermanent. The Sufi mystics came closer. They spoke of divine love, ecstatic love, love as a form of surrender. But even then, it was often directed more toward God than toward another human being. Rumi's most passionate poetry was for Shams, a spiritual brother, not a lover in the worldly sense. In Christianity, celibacy became a kind of virtue. The deeper your devotion to God, the less entangled you were supposed to be in earthly passion. Kierkegaard, who lived steeped in Protestant tradition, internalized this. He saw himself as spiritually set apart. He believed that loving Regine fully would mean failing her, because his soul belonged elsewhere. But this is not just Kierkegaard's burden. It is a pattern we find again and again. The deep thinker withdraws not because he is cold, but because he feels too much. He hesitates not because he does not care, but because he fears he might drown the other person in the weight of his mind. He loves in silence, in journals, in ideas. He sees love as holy, and because of that, often unreachable, and the world does not always know what to do with that. As society evolved, new roles emerged: the romantic hero, the Byronic man, the tortured artist. Think of Goethe's Werther, who loved Charlotte with such intensity that he ultimately took his own life. Or Shelley, whose love letters were as dramatic as his poetry. Or Kafka, who wrote endlessly to Felice Bauer but never quite married her, never quite stepped into the ordinary. These men didn't just think, they felt. They imagined love as cosmic, transformative, transcendent. But few women could live up to those imagined heights. Fewer still could withstand them. In the modern world, the tension remains, but it has taken different shapes. Today, the deep thinker may be a man immersed in philosophy podcasts, long-form essays, or spiritual practices. He might keep a journal, study Jung, meditate at 4 a.m., and talk about love as a form of union between souls. But when it comes to simple intimacy, folding laundry together, showing up on time, not spiraling into existential dread when someone doesn't text back, he often falters. And many women today, while intrigued by emotional depth, also want stability, reliability, safety. They want to be chosen, not studied. They want to feel desired, not dissected. That is not superficial. That is human. Because while depth is beautiful, it is also demanding. It requires that both people step into a space of vulnerability, that they tolerate discomfort, that they accept uncertainty. And for many, that kind of love feels less like a warm embrace and more like walking through fog. Kierkegaard called this the aesthetic versus the ethical life. The aesthetic life is lived in pursuit of beauty, passion, and individual expression. The ethical life is grounded in commitment, responsibility, and shared meaning. He believed that love had to be grounded in the ethical, but he could never quite leave the aesthetic behind. He wanted both, the wildness of romantic imagination and the sanctity of moral responsibility. And so, in the end, he chose neither. He left Regine. He said it was to protect her. But maybe it was because he could not bear to be truly known. Because for the deep thinker, to be loved is to be penetrated. And that is terrifying. Today, we live in a culture that prizes connection. We swipe and match and follow. We crave intimacy, but we are terrified of the cost. And for the deep thinker, that cost feels especially high, because he knows, viscerally, that love is not a game, that to open oneself is to be wounded, that true closeness demands a kind of death, the death of control, of idealization, of the story we've told ourselves about who we are. And many simply aren't ready for that. So they say he's too much, too intense, too sensitive, too complicated, and he, in turn, tells himself that no one will ever understand, that his thoughts are a burden, that he must retreat again to his books, his solitude, his private philosophy. He becomes a Kierkegaard without a Regine, a poet without a muse. But this is not the only possible ending. It is only the one most often repeated. To truly understand why a deep thinker is so often left unloved, we must look beyond history and into the architecture of the human mind, the psychology that shapes how we connect, or fail to connect, in love. At the core lies the tension between depth and accessibility. Deep thinkers tend to process the world through complex mental frameworks. They ponder existence, meaning, morality, identity, and love itself in ways that are not only abstract but also emotionally intense. This is not simply a habit of thought but a mode of being, an immersive, often overwhelming way of inhabiting the self. Modern psychology gives us tools to understand this tension, starting with attachment theory. Developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, attachment theory explains how early experiences with caregivers shape our expectations and behavior in adult relationships. People with secure attachment styles tend to balance intimacy and independence well, but deep thinkers often show patterns of anxious or avoidant attachment, sometimes both, paradoxically. An anxious attachment manifests as craving closeness but fearing rejection. The deep thinker feels intensely, sometimes too intensely, and this hyper-awareness can lead to worry about being abandoned or misunderstood. But the avoidant side emerges as a protective mechanism. When feelings threaten to overwhelm, the deep thinker may retreat emotionally, putting up walls to preserve their inner world. This push-pull dynamic can confuse partners and strain relationships, leaving the deep thinker feeling isolated despite their yearning for connection. Carl Jung's theories about individuation and the shadow self add another layer. Jung described the process of becoming whole by integrating both conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche, including the darker, rejected aspects we often deny. Deep thinkers tend to grapple intensely with their shadows, the fears, doubts, and contradictions that lurk beneath their polished surface. This inner complexity can make them fascinating, but also difficult to be close to. Partners may feel they are in love not with a person, but with a labyrinth, one they cannot fully navigate. This idea of the shadow resonates with Kierkegaard's existential philosophy, especially his concept of anxiety. Kierkegaard saw anxiety not as a clinical symptom, but as the dizziness of freedom, the vertigo that comes from realizing that we are responsible for choosing ourselves, for defining our essence through action. Deep thinkers live with this anxiety daily. Love then becomes not a sanctuary but a battleground where freedom, responsibility, and fear collide. From a social perspective, we live in a culture that values immediacy and simplicity. Social media encourages quick judgments, surface-level connections, and emotional snapshots. The deep thinker, who unfolds slowly and resists easy categorization, often struggles to find resonance in this landscape. Their complexity can be mistaken for aloofness or indecisiveness. Their introspection can be misread as detachment. Neuroscience supports this. Studies show that people with higher cognitive complexity process emotional stimuli differently, often engaging brain regions associated with self-reflection and abstract thinking. While this can foster empathy and insight, it can also create emotional overload. The deep thinker's brain is a busy intersection of thought and feeling, and sometimes it becomes a traffic jam. Mythology offers us archetypes that help illuminate this dynamic. The figure of Orpheus, who descends into the underworld to retrieve Eurydice, embodies the deep thinker's journey into the shadow realms of the psyche. Orpheus's love is profound, but fraught with the risk of loss. Like Kierkegaard, Orpheus must confront the painful truth that not all love stories end with reunion. In Sufi tradition, the lover is both seeker and beloved, caught in an eternal dance of longing and union. This tension mirrors the deep thinker's internal conflict, the simultaneous desire for connection and the need for solitude to grapple with the ineffable. Love is both a refuge and a fire. All these perspectives show us that being a deep thinker in love is not merely a personality quirk. It is an existential condition. It involves navigating the paradox of wanting to be known fully, yet fearing the vulnerability this demands. It means holding the tension between freedom and commitment, thought and feeling, self and other. But this paradox is also a source of immense richness. The deep thinker's love is not casual or fleeting. It is a profound encounter with mystery, a refusal to settle for surface-level affection. Their heart is a landscape of questions, and their love, a restless quest for meaning. And yet, for all this intensity, the deep thinker often finds themselves misunderstood or alone. Because love, like all human experiences, is a dance of balance. And sometimes the scales tip too far toward introspection, leaving the partner feeling unseen or overwhelmed. This is why many women, even those who admire depth, eventually choose safety over storm. They want to love the man, but they also want to live with him. They crave presence as much as passion, and in that space between, the deep thinker struggles to bridge the gap. The story of the deep thinker and love is often a story of paradoxical loneliness. Despite the richness of his inner world, or perhaps because of it, he frequently finds himself standing on the outside of relationships that promise closeness but feel fragile under the weight of his intensity. This impact ripples through many layers of his life, emotional, personal, social, even professional, and often leaves him with a sense of isolation that is hard to articulate. Emotionally, the deep thinker experiences love not as a simple joy but as a complex, sometimes painful terrain. His mind is alive with questions. Am I enough? Will she understand the chaos inside me? Can love be a place where I am truly known without being lost? These questions don't come and go. They linger, shape his moods, and often spiral into anxiety or despair. When love becomes a constant interrogation of self and other, it risks losing the spontaneous warmth that sustains relationships. The partner, sensing this intensity, may feel overwhelmed or even guilty for not being able to fix the labyrinth of thoughts and feelings. The deep thinker, in turn, may retreat, feeling misunderstood or fearing that his depth is a burden too heavy to carry. This dynamic can erode self-confidence. Over time, the deep thinker might begin to believe that his way of loving, his introspection, his search for meaning, is a flaw rather than a gift. He internalizes rejection as evidence that something is wrong with him, and the resulting self-doubt can deepen the cycle of isolation. Socially, the consequences are no less significant. In friendships and community, the deep thinker may be labeled as too intense, overly sensitive, or hard to read. These labels, often unconsciously applied, act as subtle barriers, pushing others to keep their distance or to simplify interactions. In romantic relationships, this can be even more painful, as intimacy requires vulnerability, trust, and a willingness to face discomfort together. Historically, this pattern is not new. Consider the myth of Narcissus, whose self-absorption led to his tragic end, not because he was vain, but because his profound inward focus created a barrier between himself and the world. Or the story of Kafka, whose letters reveal a man torn between his desire for connection and his paralyzing self-reflection, ultimately dying lonely and misunderstood. Even Kierkegaard's own life was marked by this tragic dance. His break with Regine was both an act of love and a source of profound suffering. He believed that by letting her go, he was sparing her from the turmoil of his existential struggles. But the price was immense, a lifelong solitude and the haunting question of what might have been. In careers, too, the deep thinker's impact is complex. Their reflective nature makes them excellent problem solvers, creative thinkers, and empathetic leaders. Yet the same traits can lead to overanalysis, procrastination, and a paralysis of action. The fear of misunderstanding or failure can prevent them from fully stepping into their potential, especially in fields where decisiveness and social ease are prized. Within relationships, this paralysis can manifest as hesitation in commitment or difficulty expressing needs clearly. The deep thinker might fear vulnerability so much that they build invisible walls, not out of coldness, but out of a desperate attempt to protect themselves and their loved ones from pain. Yet the consequences of this emotional distancing are profound. Partners may feel abandoned or confused, believing that the deep thinker does not care or is not invested. The deep thinker, however, experiences the opposite, a fierce, often overwhelming care that feels impossible to communicate in ordinary ways. This mismatch creates a painful cycle. The partner withdraws. The thinker retreats further into their mind. Intimacy, instead of growing, withers under the weight of unspoken fears and unmet expectations. Psychologically, this pattern can contribute to depression, anxiety, and chronic feelings of loneliness. The deep thinker is caught between the desire for connection and the fear of losing themselves in that connection. This tension can lead to emotional burnout and a pervasive sense of being different, which only deepens the divide between self and others. And yet, in many ways, this painful tension is the very crucible in which the deep thinker's unique gifts are forged. The capacity to hold complexity, to wrestle with existential questions, to love with fierce sincerity, these come from a soul that has survived its own storms. Still, surviving is not the same as thriving. The emotional and social costs can be heavy. Without awareness and support, the deep thinker risks living a life of muted love, loving deeply but never fully receiving love in return. And this is the cruel irony. The very qualities that make the deep thinker a profound lover also make his love difficult to hold. The challenge, then, is not to give up on love, but to find ways to bridge these worlds, the mind and the heart, solitude and connection, thought and feeling. This journey is as old as humanity itself, echoing through history and myth, yet as urgent as the quiet ache of a man wondering if he will ever be truly loved. So, how does the deep thinker, caught in this delicate dance between mind and heart, begin to bridge the gap? How does he learn to love in a way that invites others in, instead of pushing them away? And how can those who love him understand and hold that complexity without feeling lost? The answer is not a quick fix, but a lifelong practice. A gradual unfolding that blends ancient wisdom with modern psychology, reflection with action, solitude with presence. First, the deep thinker must cultivate self-compassion. This means learning to treat the restless mind not as a flaw or enemy, but as part of the whole self. Psychologist Kristin Neff defines self-compassion as the act of being kind and understanding toward oneself, especially in moments of suffering or perceived inadequacy. For the deep thinker, who often berates himself for overthinking or feeling too much, this is radical. It means pausing the internal critique and gently acknowledging, "I am trying. I am enough." Journaling can be a powerful tool here. Writing not to analyze or solve, but simply to express creates a safe container for the flood of thoughts and emotions. It can help the deep thinker recognize patterns without judgment, notice where anxiety or fear take hold, and slowly release some of the pressure. Mindfulness and meditation, too, offer a way to step back from the swirling mind. Techniques like focused breathing or body scans help anchor attention in the present moment. The deep thinker, who often dwells in what-ifs or philosophical abstraction, can find relief in the simple experience of here and now. This does not silence the mind, but creates a new relationship with it, one where thoughts are observers rather than dictators. At the same time, communication skills are essential. The deep thinker often struggles to translate his inner world into language that feels accessible to others. Learning to speak simply and directly about needs and feelings, without fearing judgment or rejection, can open new doors in relationships. This might mean practicing vulnerability in small doses, sharing a fear, a hope, or a frustration, to build trust gradually. Therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, or emotion-focused therapy, EFT, can support this process by helping the thinker reframe negative beliefs and develop emotional regulation skills. Therapy offers a guided space to explore these challenges with compassion and professional insight. From a historical and philosophical perspective, the deep thinker can draw strength from traditions that honor both solitude and connection. Stoicism, often misunderstood as cold detachment, actually teaches resilience and acceptance of what we cannot control, including others' responses to our love. Marcus Aurelius reminds us to focus on our own actions and character, rather than on the unpredictable reactions of others. Sufi teachings bring another dimension: love as surrender and trust. The Sufi poet Rumi invites us to embrace the mystery of love without trying to possess or control it. This attitude can help the deep thinker loosen the grip of anxiety and perfectionism that often shadow his relationships. Practicing gratitude, too, grounds us in what is present rather than what is missing. The deep thinker may tend to fixate on gaps or misunderstandings, but turning attention to moments of connection, a shared smile, a kind word, a gesture of care, nurtures hope and openness. Importantly, boundaries become a tool for balance. The deep thinker may either withdraw completely or overwhelm with intensity. Learning to set and respect boundaries helps create a space where both partners feel safe and valued. It's a way of saying, "I love you enough to also respect your needs, and I ask the same in return." In relationships, this balance might look like scheduling time for deep conversations, but also for light-hearted activities. It means honoring silence without interpreting it as rejection. It means allowing space for spontaneity and ritual, for passion and routine. Finally, the journey involves embracing imperfection, in ourselves, in love, and in life. Kierkegaard believed that the leap of faith was essential, the decision to commit despite uncertainty and anxiety. For the deep thinker, this leap might feel terrifying, but it is also transformative. Love does not demand that we have all the answers, only that we are willing to be present with the questions. It asks not for perfection, but for honesty and courage. So the deep thinker begins to practice love as an art, not a science, a dance of giving and receiving, of openness and retreat, of mind and heart in dialogue. And those who love him learn to listen not just to words, but to silences, to hold space without rushing to fix, to embrace the mystery without needing certainty. In this shared journey, the paradox of the deep thinker's love transforms from a barrier into a bridge. As we come to the close of this exploration, we return to the question that started it all. Why will she never love a deep thinker? The answer, we see, is layered and complex, much like the deep thinker himself. She may never love him in the easy, effortless way that others do. His mind is a maze, his heart a storm. His love is not a simple flame, but a fire that both warms and threatens to consume. For many, this is too much. They want the comfort of clarity, the safety of predictability. But the deep thinker offers none of that. He offers mystery, paradox, and depth. And yet, this very challenge contains a profound gift. The deep thinker's love, though difficult, is a rare and precious thing. It is a love that asks not for surface approval, but for true knowing. It demands courage, the courage to face the shadows, to embrace uncertainty, to risk vulnerability. We see this pattern echoed through history, from Kierkegaard, his own life and writings, to ancient myths and sacred traditions. The struggle to be fully oneself while deeply connecting to another is an eternal human theme. It is the dance of freedom and commitment, thought and feeling, solitude and union. In psychology, we recognize that these tensions are not signs of failure, but signals pointing us toward growth. The deep thinker and S journey is a microcosm of the human condition, the quest to reconcile inner complexity with outer connection, to find meaning in a world that often feels fragmented and fleeting. For you, whether you identify as a deep thinker or love one, this journey invites reflection. How do you hold space for complexity in yourself and others? How do you navigate the delicate balance between needing solitude and craving intimacy? What fears or assumptions might you be willing to set down to allow love more room to breathe? Pause here for a moment. Consider journaling or simply sitting with these questions. What arises for you? This path is not easy, but it is vital, because love, in its deepest form, is not about finding perfection or escaping pain. It is about showing up, again and again, with honesty, courage, and grace. And in this showing up, we discover that love is less about possession and more about presence. It is a shared journey of becoming, of learning to live together with mystery, to dance with paradox, and to cherish the unfolding story of self and other. So perhaps the answer to why I'll never love a deep thinker is also an invitation to love differently, more deeply, more patiently, to recognize that in the very challenge lies the possibility of transformation. This is a space where thought meets feeling, where history meets now, and where your own story continues to unfold with all its complexity and beauty. As Kierkegaard might remind us, the leap of faith is always an act of love. Love of self, love of other, love of life itself. Will you take that leap? Thank you for taking this journey with me into the heart of what it means to love and be loved as a deep thinker. This space we share is more than just a place for ideas. It is a space for growth, reflection, and emotional honesty. If you found yourself nodding, questioning, or feeling seen, then you belong here. Together, we explore the layers beneath the surface, the psychology, the history, the raw human experience that shapes who we are and how we relate. You have within you a well of strength, curiosity, and resilience. And sometimes reclaiming your personal power means embracing the very complexities that feel like burdens. It means learning to master the self, not through force or perfection, but through compassion and awareness. Here we walk that path side by side. We do not shy away from the difficult questions or the shadows. Instead, we meet them with open hearts and thoughtful minds. So if you want to continue this journey, delving deeper into self-awareness, exploring the subtle dynamics of power and connection, and discovering practical tools to live with greater purpose and integrity, I invite you to subscribe. This channel is for those who seek more than quick answers or superficial fixes. It is for those who want to grow emotionally, think deeply, and live meaningfully. Together, we will keep asking the hard questions and nurturing the quiet courage it takes to live authentically. Will you join me? Because in this shared space, we learn that true power comes not from control, but from understanding, not from domination, but from connection. Subscribe, and let us continue this journey of becoming more aware, more compassionate, more alive. Your story matters. Your growth matters. And most of all, your capacity to love deeply and truly matters.